What's going on, guys? It's Nick here, back with another video. First week of the fantasy playoffs are here, so let's start things off by taking a look at the waiver wire. Honestly, this is a better week 15 waiver wire than usual, mostly though because of the running back position. I would say there's pretty much nothing at wide receiver, tight end, a little bit, not terrible at quarterback, defense, pretty solid, but running back is what makes this week pretty solid, so we'll start off at that position. We'll start off with Patrick Taylor. I think that's potentially, we'll see, the top option, and it just comes down to Isaac Urendo. So he leaves last week with the ankle injury, doesn't return. He said after the game it was precautionary, that he feels good. The one question mark here is they play on Thursday, and it was after the game, right? What happens if there's more swelling overnight? What happens if they're like, okay, he can't practice on Tuesday, on Wednesday? Maybe they don't know if he can go on Thursday, meaning they have to implement Patrick Taylor into the game plan more. Like, there are a lot of factors at play because it's an injury and then a Thursday game. If it was a Sunday game, maybe it'd be a different story. But yeah, they might be down to their fifth string running back on Thursday. So it's just going to be basically the wait and see mode. If Isaac is able to play, you have to assume that he's fine, that he's at certainly elevated risk of a re-injury, but that he's fine, and that if you added Patrick Taylor, you probably cannot trust him at all unless it's like a 16-team league and you're like, I need anyone who's going to get touches, which could be some of you, but for most of you, you wouldn't be using Patrick Taylor. So hopefully we know a little bit more later today on Monday, on Tuesday, and so when you're making that waiver claim, hopefully we kind of know what's going to happen. If it seems like Isaac is going to play, he's not as good of an option. But if it seems like Isaac is not going to play, I don't think they trust Izzy. I don't think they trust any of these other backups that they could use. I do think Patrick Taylor would actually have a decent workload and one to where you'd probably be starting him as a running back too. So because of that level of upside, he is worth going after. But again, we'll see on injury news. After him, I would say we're looking at Tank Bigsby as well. He finally looked healthy again this last weekend. When healthy, like when he's looked healthy this season, Tank Bigsby has looked like a really, really good running back. He had 20 opportunities this week. He had all 4 short yardage opportunities. That should hold if he can stay healthy. Basically, that's been the only thing holding him back has been health. Of course, the Jaguars offense as a whole is also going to hold him back. It's not a good offense. Obviously, they're not expected to be winning a ton of games, but they face the Jets, the Raiders, and the Titans. So even though the Jaguars are not a good team, those are not like amazing defenses we have to avoid. And they're not very good offenses to a point where the Jaguars are not going to close the season 3-0, but can they be competitive in all 3 to where he would still be the 1A? If they're competitive, if there's just a generic game against a regular defense where they are relatively competitive in, I would expect the rest of the season Tank Bigsby to get somewhere in the like 15 to 17 touch range, with most of that being on the ground, so not as valuable as it could be, you know, if it was like Alvin Kamara getting 15 to 17 touches. But of course, someone like Alvin Kamara is not available on free agency, and anyone capable and expecting to get in that 15 to 17 touch range should be rostered in 100% of leagues, so he is definitely a good one to go after. We also have Braylon Allen and Isaiah Davis. Kind of want to just talk about this backfield in general. So we thought kind of earlier in the season that it's like, okay, because, I mean, Braylon Allen was splitting the workload with Breece Hall. Like, he was actually like in a split. We've had a number of coaching changes. We've had injuries to a point where it's like there's a bunch of jumbled mess here with the touches. We have Breece Hall missing the last week, so it was okay. We knew that Isaiah Davis was going to get touches because he was already kind of starting to get those touches the week before. We didn't know the split would be this close. It was 37 snaps for Braylon Allen, 36 snaps for Isaiah Davis, 11 carries for Allen, 10 carries for Davis, 4 receptions for Allen, 3 for Davis. So Allen was the lead back, but Isaiah Davis was the one with the touchdown. Isaiah Davis was the one only getting, 2 fewer touches on 1 fewer snap. That could honestly be randomness. So a very close to even workload. I would say this week they're at the Jaguars. The expectation right now is that Breece Hall will play, but it's the expectation right now. We have no idea what's going to happen later in the week with the knee. Does it flare up? Do they want to hold him out? Because honestly, they're not making the playoffs, obviously. So we'll see. We'll see what kind of happens there. But just given the chance that you don't have Breece Hall out there, this week in a great matchup against the Jaguars, a very winnable game for the Jets. There's a world where both these backs are in that like 25 to 30 for running back range, talking about Braylon Allen and Isaiah Davis. And if that's the case, obviously both should be rostered everywhere for that upside. Final high-end running back claim is Sincere McCormick. White and Madison both missed again this week. And again, McCormick looked like the best running back on this roster. Like, he's only played in 3 games, and in one of those games he had like 5 or 6 touches. But in all 3, he's looked great. And no other running back on this team. Maybe the one game from Abdullah, he looked okay. But realistically, if you look at like all games for Zamir White, Madison, Abdullah, can you point to a single time where any of them, for even one game, actually looked good? Not really. Like maybe one, maybe twice, but it just hasn't been happening. They have not looked good. And in all 3 games, Sincere McCormick has actually looked good. So I think they're going to give him the workload because who cares, right? On this offense, they're not going to be like, well, we got to go out there and win some games. Well, number one, he's been your best running back. Number 2, you're not making playoffs. You're obviously not. Like, there's nothing that's really beneficial for this season in terms of we've got to play these other running backs. It's more, what do we have in Sincere? Because if you go back and you're like, okay, let's say Zamir and Madison are healthy this coming week, and let's say Abdullah is healthy. Like, you're not learning anything. We kind of know at this point exactly who all of those running backs are, and they're not that good. They're not running backs you want to build your team around. But what if Sincere is? So I think they're going to give him a chance the rest of the season, see what they have in him, because he does have some upside, and he's another back where it's like, if we think he can get 15-plus opportunities a week for the rest of the season, obviously that is worth it. And I would really say at this point of the year, again, we're in week 15, there's only a maximum of 3 weeks left for the fantasy playoffs. Like, spend your number one claim. If any of, Patrick Taylor, if, we get word that it seems like Isaac might miss, but Patrick Taylor, Tank Bigsby, Braylon Allen, Sincere McCormick, if any of them are available, it is worth spending that number one claim on. It is worth dumping a bunch of fab on them because you can't take your fab, into next season. So it's just worth doing it, right? There's not that much time left. If there's someone you want, go after them. In terms of preference, given what we know right now, I'd probably say it's Tank, then Sincere, then Taylor, then Allen. But again, it truly just comes down to the injury news. If I knew Isaac was out, Patrick Taylor would be number one. If I knew Breece Hall was out, Allen would probably be above Tank and Sincere. It really comes down to his injuries. And since we don't know, I would say Tank, Sincere, Taylor, and Allen. That's probably how I do it. One other running back on the lower end. Oh, and then Isaiah Davis would kind of be mixed in with Allen there, obviously, but below Allen. One other running back I want to mention is Kendre Miller, who would be, again, at the bottom of this list. I said to stash him a few weeks ago because, Dennis Allen hated him, but he wasn't hurt when he was put on IR. He was not injured. He just didn't like him, so he put him there. But he's gone, right? They've said that they, all gas, no brakes, basically, for Kendre Miller this season. I don't know if they're officially eliminated, but the Saints are eliminated from the playoffs. I think one more loss and they're officially eliminated. I don't think Derek Carr is going to play the rest of the season. So they're cooked, right? Would make 0 sense for them to feature Alvin Kamara at this point. I think Kendre's in line for a lot of touches. Even this last week, he played less than 30% of snaps. He still had 11 opportunities. Box score doesn't look amazing, but I think he actually looks pretty decent. Again, first game back too, he's going to kind of be ramping up. I think there's a world where he has 15 plus opportunities rest of the season. Another one where we really want to be rostering these guys that are capable of that because there's upside. Even if the Saints stink, even if the Jaguars stink, even if some of these teams are not good, you're a running back getting 15 plus opportunities. You are valuable in fantasy. As alluded to before, there's really nothing at wide receiver, so we'll kind of breeze through this. Top options are Romeo Doubs, Cedric Tillman, Adam Thielen, tier break, Trey Tucker, Jalen McMillan, Tim Patrick, and Joshua Palmer. I would say Doubs, Tillman, Thielen, they're all flex viable this week. I don't know that any of them will be like amazing plays if to jam to starting lineups, but it ultimately just comes down to injuries. Doubs, Tillman, they're working back from the concussions. Do they return? For Thielen, it's Jalen Coker. Does Jalen Coker return this week? If he does, it kind of muddies the waters there a little bit. I think because of how good his connection has been, Thielen, with Bryce Young right now and how much they're wanting to develop Bryce Young, I think it actually does make sense for them to use Thielen a lot rest of the season, just because you want Bryce Young having that confidence, and he's really growing in his confidence right now. He's playing some of the best football, probably the best football of his career right now. Like he's playing a lot better than maybe the box score indicates. Like he's playing well, and especially playing well given what he's throwing to. It hasn't been amazing, and there's been injuries on that offense. I think because he's really focused on Adam Thielen, they're going to want him in the lineup. Not to say that Coker won't have opportunities when he does come back, but they're not just going to completely bench Adam Thielen to play Coker. So I think those three are probably your top options. I would probably order it how I listed: Dobbs, Tillman, Thielen. But again, it comes down to opportunities, and also comes down to like the rankings. Like we'll see. I'll have the first update of the rankings on Tuesday. Then I'll update that throughout the week. You can kind of see how that moves. Again, free rest of season through the Super Bowl on my website, thefantasyfootballadvice.com. With the other four, I would say, Trey Tucker, Jalen McMillan, Tim Patrick, Joshua Palmer. I doubt you're using any of them in the fantasy playoffs, even in like a 14 or 16 team league. I would say in 16, it starts to become more viable. But they're pretty low end options, if that's what I'm saying, is okay, they become viable in a 16 team league. But, if you are in a deeper league, if you kind of squeaked into the playoffs and you really need that flex spot, maybe you're in like a 3 wide receiver league, a 2 flex league, and you kind of need that last spot, those are fine. I wouldn't want to be relying on any of them. With Tucker, you're going to need the big play. With McMillan, you're kind of hoping, because McMillan was someone I loved this offseason, kind of battled through opportunities. I thought he'd have a much stronger role than he did, but he's coming off a pretty good game. Does that kind of develop into something for the future? Tim Patrick, of course, he's like the 9th option of this offense. Like, not that bad, but the point, like, he's not the top option on offense, but he's also not the top option for defenses to be covering. So he has opportunities there. And I think he's actually a pretty good wide receiver. And then Palmer, that would be if Ladd is out again. Palmer would be okay. But again, none of these guys are ones you really want to rely on in fantasy. At tight end, it's a similar story. I'm only seeing 2 options right now. Noah Gray has 4 receptions and 4 straight. So if you're in full PPR and you need someone, he's probably going to have around 4 receptions. Again, he's on KC, so definitely a threat to score a touchdown. And then Bellinger, available in 78 or played 78% of snaps, available in probably 99% of leagues. 7 targets. He's going to be the receiving option now that Theo Johnson is on IR. So if you needed like a low end tight end too, both these 2 are options. Again, I'm hoping you're not looking for a low end tight end 2 right now. At quarterback, top streaming options are Drake May at the Cardinals, Bryce Young versus the Cowboys, Caleb Williams at the Vikings, Will Levis versus the Bengals. I don't have a strong take right now. I have not done the quarterback rankings obviously yet. I don't have a strong take on the exact order, but I would say Will Levis for sure is last. Like, it is pretty easily May, Young, and Caleb at the top, but I think it's more personal preference. May, I think my personal preference is having him at the top because of that rushing upside. Like, he could run for 70 yards and a touchdown, not something Bryce Young is going to do. But Bryce Young has been playing really well. He's got a tougher matchup because the pass rush is now healthy for Dallas, and they've been playing a lot better on defense. But again, Bryce Young's been playing better, so he's definitely an option. I mean, I don't want to understate how well Bryce Young has been playing. He's been playing some pretty decent defenses. He just played the Eagles, who are like the best defense in football, and he's looked good. And so he is developing well. I don't know how much I would trust him in my first match with fantasy playoffs, but if you've been streaming and he's a top option, fine. The odds are you do not need to go to Bryce Young. I think Caleb has the best weapons, but at the Vikings, the Vikings have a great defense. Basically, the positive here is that they are not going to be able to run the ball. They are going to have, a 70% pass rate in this game. They're going to be trailing. They're probably going to lose. That's a positive for Caleb because it's going to increase dropbacks, increase potential for scrambles, increase pass attempts. So even if you're inefficient on those, we can see what happened on Thanksgiving, where the volume just wins, and he has a good day because of that. Again, I would just check the rankings when they come out for the final take on those 4. My guess is that they're all going to project similarly, and again, my personal preference would be Drake May. Then finally, streaming defenses. You've got a lot of options that are 60 to 70% owned, so the odds are 1 or 2 of these teams are going to be available for you. Normally, we're only spending 3 to 4% of our fab on a defense that we want. But again, it's the playoffs. And now your season can come down to defense. Like if you pick right on a defense, get 15 points, you might advance. You might end up winning a championship because of that. You're allowed to drop as much fab as you want on defenses. You have to win. At this point on, you have to be winning. So spend anything you need to get the best roster you can, because there's no point in leaving the season, ending the season with a bunch of fab. Again, rankings not out yet, obviously. But right now, how I would order it for waivers is Ravens at the Giants, Broncos versus the Colts, Vikings versus the Bears, Cardinals versus the Patriots, Chargers versus the Bucks, Packers at Seahawks, Chiefs at Browns, Cowboys at Panthers, and then Jets at Jaguars. Again, I will have a full rankings done for Tuesday, and then that'll kind of update later in the week. And then also I want you to remember the Colts. The Colts are not someone I would use this week, but they were on bye last week. They're at Denver this week. So the odds are they're available in a decent amount of leagues. If you have the opportunity on your bench to stash the Colts, they're going to have a home game versus the Titans next week, and then they're at the Giants the week after that. So if you can pick up one of the defenses I mentioned for this week, then also have the Colts, you're set. You're fine. You have a defense with a good matchup for the fantasy playoffs. So that's how waivers are looking for week 15. Again, full waiver wire table is available on my website, thefantasyfootballadvice.com. But we also have the week 15 rankings, detailed projections, positional reports, DFS content, and a whole lot more, including Dynasty. Again, 100% free now through the Super Bowl. Again, thefantasyfootballadvice.com. All right, that'll do it for this one. I will see you all on Thursday morning for the rankings video.